as I mentioned before, we had talked about your mayor and the advice that he had given you in regarding running for city council or not, and then also in some of the ways that he governs in that city. And you had mentioned before that he's pretty adamant and vocal about the influences that he's taken from the African American struggle. So if you mind talking
Yeah,
about that a little bit and tell me a little bit about that?
sure. Because this is the thing that I think if you're projecting, you miss an opportunity, meaning you project thinking they don't like me, they don't understand me, and you'd be surprised, pleasantly surprised. So let me tell the story of my journey with the mayor and let me answer your question first of all, his experience. So um when he was at my house that day, when I mentioned before the house party, he was outside because I asked him, let's sit outside. I want to learn more about you because he was probably the most famous person at the time in the room, and he was sort of standoffish and watching people, and people were nervous because the mayor was in the house. The Japanese, at least, were. So I said, let's go outside. You're probably, want to relax and have people, talk to somebody. So he's like, yeah, I want to talk. So I said, come on out. So he's sitting with me, and he explains to me how, he was always interested in like different things. He was a different kind of kid, and so he wound up going to college overseas in California, studied
Mm.
urban design or urban planning or something. But anyway, he was always into like building and societies and stuff. Just his personal interest. And while he was there, he was an immigrant, a foreigner, and he was with a whole bunch of other foreigners. There's a picture on his Facebook page of his roommates or his batchmates, and they have turbans on their heads and all these type of things, different types of people. And he explained that. And he explained that upon graduation, he said this publicly too, so it's not a secret. When he graduated from college, Japanese companies didn't want to hire him because they're like, "You're not in our system. You're not one of us." So he wound up working for an American company, and he wound up in Houston. And these are his words, not mine. When he went to Houston, he would see signs that say "Home of the KKK." He would see news articles about migrants who went missing or suspected, foul play of being kidnapped or lynched or killed. And this is also during the Japan bashing time. So he explained to me once that he was driving down the road in his very, we say, like sort of racist town he lived in. He saw two black men walking along the highway in the opposite direction who looked very disheveled. And he thought, they're not safe. I can't let them do this. I can't let them walk. They're in a very, they don't know where they're at. So he stops the car, asks them where they're going. They said they're going to Detroit, but they heard there's jobs up there. So he's like, look, get in the car. Let me take you home. Let me clean you up. And they're like, they probably very weird of them to see this Asian man pick them up, but they took them home. He and his wife cleaned them up, let them stay, and they learned about him. They learned he was Japanese, right? He's part of those people who are taking the jobs from the people in Detroit. And they went on their merry way. And he got a letter later, especially after there was a murder of a Chinese man. People mistook for a Japanese person. There was this murder in Detroit area during that time, and they wrote a letter to him saying, "You know what? We're here trying to tell people that Japanese people aren't bad, right?" He made that impact on them.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? They never would have met a Japanese person. They probably were the same people preaching, and they didn't have to. They could keep quiet. They don't need to tell their friends, Japanese people are okay. You risk ostracization when things are heated like that. But they did
Mhm.
it, and they mailed him to tell him that. He wound up, I think, attending a black church, singing in it. And he told me his words, not mine. He was inspired by Jesse Jackson's run for president in '84 and '88. That could happen in America. Diversity being what it is, a man whose descendants were slaves and given all the segregation stuff in America could legitimately compete for the highest office in the land.
Mhm.
So he learned a lot about the power of diversity living in America, and he wanted to build that in Japan. So, in short, the benefits that all the people in Nagariyama are receiving over the last 20 years of him being mayor, the fastest growing city in Japan, property values being tremendous, schools being great, opportunities for women, for everyone, you know, that's a product of diversity. That's a product of Japanese, different. They don't know it. They
Mm.
don't know that difference is the reason. that their Japan is doing so well. They should know it.
Mm.
You know, if they met Yoshi and talked to him, they would realize this. So your joy is predicated on the benefits of someone thinking and acting differently.
Mm.
All of us are. We don't think about it that way because difference in the context and usually is disruptive to us, but eventually it becomes normal if you let it be. If you try to find a way to embrace it, normalcy comes. Anyway, I don't mean to preach, but that's what he shared with me. And when he shared that with me, I said, you know what? I want to run for office as well. I started to realize, wait, I can be myself. I can't be afraid of people rejecting me because of what I look like, or people rejecting me because I think differently, or I live my life differently. He was evidence of that, right? He had walked the talk, and I was going to walk the talk now, right? So that was that. And so he's been a big, he's been a big proponent of African Americans, particularly in this city. I could give many examples. I wouldn't say he's helping me. He's not. He's doing what he was called to do. He helps everyone. You know, he's a good man. He doesn't give me any special treatment, but he can relate to me, and I can relate to him. And so I think when we talk real talk.
Right.
So
I
that's
think
him.
I think it's a great story, and like you said, it's something that I think people should know.
Yes, they should.
Yeah. Now
They really should.
your second book was released not too long ago.
It released in September of last year.
Right, and that's
Reading the Air.
reading there, which comes from that Japanese saying of Kukyo-yomu.
Yes, Kukyoyomu, which is a skill you need, which was my skill and talent, I think, when I came to Japan. Because I think being different, again, diversity, being different, you sort of have to read the room sometimes because people don't communicate with you the same way they communicate with each other. Sometimes you're dealing with unconscious bias and conscious bias that prevent you from being that can make you feel a little unplugged from what's happening, and you have to read the room. And that skill, I didn't realize it was valuable. I came to Japan and I realized I was doing it. Um, but I wanted to also reflect on the fact that to be successful in Japan, you do need to read the room and accept what you're seeing. A lot of times when you come to Japan, it's so different, and you're like, "They're so different. This is wrong." No, it's not wrong. You just don't like it.
Right.
Um, and if you can understand it and you can find your way in it, you'll be fine. And so I wanted to provide people with examples of how you find your way and that you can. So I wrote it, all of the things, I'd written the book long after I'd met Yoshi. I read the book long after a lot of the challenges I faced in my career, but I wrote it because I wanted people to perhaps have a head start, again, have a bridge that I did not have, at least a bigger bridge. I had a bridge. There were people who came before me, obviously, um, who helped pave the way for me, whether I know it or not. Very true. So I wanted to expand that bridge. I wanted to make it wider and bigger and something everyone can see. So that's why I wrote the book. And I talk about, certain things I've learned that you can take with you, and other people have learned you can take with you into a room, like understanding how risk aversion plays a big role in how the Japanese see the world.
Mm.
Risk aversion, various types of risk aversion. And I explain it specifically. I give examples. I explain how it impacted me. I explain how I've taken advantage of it or failed, and how you can, and how other people have taken advantage of this to help them be successful, whether it's in their private lives or in their career. I point out examples of where change or difference can make you racist. You don't
Mm.
want to think about you're being racist or exclusionary, but you are. But it comes from somewhere. Give yourself a little bit of credit, a little bit of grace. It's hard being a human being. We make mistakes. So I wanted people to understand it's okay. You can make all the mistakes in the world, but keep trying. You'll find it somewhere. You'll find your way. I also wanted to just showcase also, I think a lot of the people whom have contributed to me. Like in the book, I talk about, some of my staff who worked for me, and I describe them in detail. I describe how I learned to be a better leader working with them. Uh, I would give them a copy of the book, but they bought it. They bought the book to thank me, I guess. I don't know. They just want to support me. But I wanted these people to know how much they contributed. Like my wives, for instance, my ex-wives, they contributed and they made a difference. And and showing how relationships support you and how you can sabotage them just simply without even knowing it. The world's working on you in ways you don't know, and you're manifesting negativity in ways you don't even see. Um, it's life is complicated, and I have a way of writing I think is quite simple.
Mm.
I use comedy, I use lots of metaphors, I use lots of social references that people in my generation can refer to. Like I use a lot of Star Wars and Star Trek references in the book. Not a lot, like three or four. That's a lot, I think, if you don't like Star Trek, or maybe three too many. Um, and the book was a product. Also, I had a lot of beta readers, people I worked with in my career, who I worked for, who were just colleagues. I said, "Can you please beta read this?" And all of them, most of them, beta read it, gave me feedback to make it a better book. So the book is a product of a lot of input,
Good,
not
good.
just me being some smart Harvard grad who thinks highly of himself. No, no, no. So, um, and so I didn't think necessarily like how this will help Black folks, because I think that in general I'm helping Black folks anyway. I'm helping all folks. I'm helping Black folks just by being in the rooms, and I'm helping them by a lot of the colleague people I work with, or not work with, but people I work with that I promoted. Some of them are Black, and because they're really good at what they do, and they just need to be showcased a little bit
Right.
more, right? So I've done that. I've been a big proponent of that. Um, but to give advice, so I just think maybe where you're leading is, what can I give to young people or even older people of color when coming to Japan? And that is, how do I put this? I don't want to criticize anyone for thinking I've got to do it, me, because the world tells you if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it for you. So it's okay to come from that place. But you get as much as you give. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. And you give what you can. A lot of times people think, well, if I give someone my time, I'm going to get something out of it. You give yourself. You give what you can give. You give what you would naturally give for free, right? What I'm doing right now, talking to you, I would do for free all day long,
Mm.
giving advice or just sharing my experience. It's what I do. So share yourself, right? Um, don't expect anything in return. Just share yourself. And if you can be yourself, there will be people who will see it and who will flock to you to support you because they buy into you. But if you let yourself be derailed by what's around you and you don't get the opportunity to be yourself, you do yourself a disadvantage because people don't get to see the real you, right? So when you come to Japan, find a way, a hobby or something where you can be yourself, right? Because no matter what you do, no matter what country, what job, you're going to have days that suck. You're going to have terrible things happen to you. But if you feel motivated by what you do, if you feel like you're in the right place, you have the energy and the wherewithal to move forward. Secondly, find a network of people. Like, Tokyo Black Professionals. I started with some others in 2007, 6, 7, around that time. We have 1,000 members, almost 2,000 members online, but we meet every month. You're bound to find people, Black or not, who you can link to. There's a community there. And find your group, find your family. You need to do that. More practical things, more so than the language of Japan. You need to understand the culture of Japan. You need to be able to read the air, not just read the book. Like, this is what Japan's history. I've read all the history that can help. It supplements some things, but understanding like what's not being said, right?
Mm.
When people say Japanese don't say no, they say no all the time. It's just not the way you say no.
Mm.
And you're forcing someone. When's the last time forcing someone to do something ever works well? It doesn't, right? But we think
Right.
they should say no. No, they don't. They're doing fine. Now, they can improve. We all can, but it's not going to happen by us forcing them, right? It's
Right.
going to happen because they want to. They feel it's valuable to them. And how are they going to feel valuable? They see the value, or how are they going to think of that as a valuable thing? They'll see the value it provides to you. Everyone wants to be famous. Not everyone, but you know what I mean. Wants to be somebody. And if they think, ooh, that'll make me somebody, they'll do it. But you've got to be in, sort of inspiring, and you're not going to figure that out by unless you can accept that things are a little different here, and you have to read the air. Yeah, I think there's one more thing I can provide. Let me think about it, but those are the things that come to mind immediately.
And I would add, just from my experience, is that sometimes with coming out here, or probably any country, especially for African Americans, we have to let a little bit of the baggage, leave a little bit at the door, because we're in a different environment. So
Yeah,
sometimes the experiences that we may have here, which would trigger a certain response back home, should not trigger that response first outside of it, because the context may be different. The people that
yeah,
it's coming from may have a different perspective. You can't expect them to know the exact same thing as before,
yeah,
as the people back home, and that could limit, you know, what we're doing out
yeah.
here.
Yeah, I have an example of that that's going to offend people, but I have to share it because I think it
Uh-oh.
comes from a real place. So, I think we spoke previously, just chatting in preparation for this about the history, and I think Dr. Kearney, who's now in Okinawa, retired, wrote a book on it about the history of African Americans and Japanese before World War II.
Mm,
And the Japanese, when they defeated Russia, considered themselves a colored nation, and the
mm,
world considered them a colored nation. And so a lot of the black intellectuals who came to Japan in the 20s and 30s, um, and the connection Japan seemed to want to build with the Pan African and the African diaspora is real. A lot of the Japanese I met when I was first here in their 80s, when I was here there in the 70s and 80s, they were more my proponent than the young Japanese were. We were not only exotic, we were strong, we were resilient, we were brilliant, given all of the struggles we had, right? As African, this diaspora and Africans, right? African Americans. So there's a history, though it's going as the culture changes. There's a history of a strong connection, a strong admiration for African Americans, and I see that when I meet older Japanese,
mm.
right? Older Japanese. They all knew about when I was here. All the older Japanese knew about the Negro Leagues. They knew Josephine Baker. They knew Satchel Paige. They knew, right, more than the average American did. So, in that context, given that unconsciously Japan is still sort of second. Let me think about it. When Japan started to take over America in the 80s, there was that there's a murder in Detroit. There was the Japanese kid who got shot on his school trip. It was in the late 80s. I don't know if you remember. It was the freeze incident. All the Japanese remember the young man was told to freeze. He doesn't know what freeze means. And he
Right.
was going through a yard because he went to the wrong party or something. And the guy shot him thinking he was a trespasser of some sort. Though, you can say it's some young Japanese kid really a threat, but still it happened.
Right.
So I think there's these cultural cues that if you're, depending on the type of person you are, talking about Japanese, you can feel like a second class citizen. America has its basis here. When I came to Japan, even though there could be some chauvinism, there's even Japanese would say we have this inferiority complex to Americans,
Right.
right? Slightly, right? So let me just say, in the context of that, when a certain Japanese person touches your hair, it has a different meaning than if they did it in America. It's different. I was at a funeral many years ago, and there were these older women. I mean, old, like they were in their 90s at the table, sitting at a table because one of their family members had passed away. That a family it was part of they were connected to my host family, so at a funeral or a hoji or something like that. Basically, one of those events, and they're sitting at the table, and one of them was like, "I remember when I was young, and we would see the black soldiers or the black, black men, the athletes who came with the Negro Leagues or whatever, or the jazz singers or whatever." He goes, "They were so attractive. I so wish I would have dated one or married one." She was joking about that, right? And she sees me, and she's like, she goes, "Young man, you're so handsome," and blah blah blah. She's literally this older woman making a pass at me. She's in a wheelchair, and she wants to touch my hair, right? She wants to. Now, come on, it's not like, "Hey, boy." She's like, "You know what? You remind me of what I should have been doing when I was your age." It's a different context. But if I did not let go of my burden, not let go of what's on my shoulders and understand the context of Japan, then I could have taken a moment that with this person was just trying to connect to their youth and trying to say, you know what, you're special to me. I would have screwed that up. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
I
Just an
kind of
example.
get where you're going. I
Of
think
course, you
you're
say kind of because I use this example specifically
right.
because the idea of touching another person's hair can be very demeaning, and it's probably something that we as blacks will not budge on.
Well,
It's
I
wrong.
think there's
Yeah,
at least two ways of taking that. There's one
of
where the
course.
way you're talking about where more of it's a demeaning come here boy type of situation.
Yeah.
And I think there's another way that a lot of the youth today particularly talk about, and it's more about being treated as an object.
Yes.
Not,
No, get me wrong.
not
Don't get me wrong.
not
That
yeah,
woman, exactly. You're an object, or you're being fetishized.
right,
Fetishized.
right,
Exactly. And I have no doubt that a 90-year-old woman was fetishizing me.
right,
Yes.
right.
Exactly. She probably was to a very large degree. You know what I mean?
She
But
saw some
the
chocolate that she was interested in.
exactly. But the reality is, if I slapped her
Oh, she
hand and
sold
said,
her
"Woman, you
hair.
don't do that," rather than
Right.
saying, "Thank you, young lady. Thank you, young lady. But you know what? It's I think your time's passed or something like that." I said, "It's okay." You know what I'm saying? It's a case of
Right.
if I'm at the bottom of society and someone fetishizes me versus being at the top. Think about it.
Right.
When you're a celebrity, let's say some people admire you, they fetishize you. They
Hmm.
have your posters on the wall. They want to
Hmm.
shake your hand. They want you to sign their book for them, right? And it can be demeaning from time to time. It can be like, I'm having dinner with my family, but please. But the context is different. I'm not saying it's right, but it's different.
Right.
I have to let certain things go in order to be in the moment. I'm not saying you let people touch your hair. I'm not saying you just let it go and smile and go, yes, boss, you touched my hair. I don't mean that.
Right.
But you've got to understand the context to respond in the right way.
That
See what I
and
mean?
exactly.
That's what I'm trying to say. And
And
that's
I
why I
think that's
use
the
this
point.
really difficult example because I think what's going to happen is people who listen to this, they're going to say, well, this is unacceptable. And I'm like, because it's a hard thing. In order for you to get from point A to point B, you're going to have to question not only the rules of society, but the rules you put in your head.
Yes.
You see what I mean? It's sort of like, and then the reason you have to do this, and this is the reason, because at the end of the day, this is what we're all looking for, I think, is to be in a position of power and influence over our own lives,
Hmm.
more so than we have, right? And when you get power, unconsciously, you start to think of the righteousness of your way, right? Because I'm successful, I must be doing what's right. And history shows us every time that you think that you are right, you're sowing the seeds of your own destruction.
Mm.
You think you're right just because. So that questioning of, am I right? Is there a better way?
Mm.
I deal with this as a manager and the leader of a company every day. Am I doing the right thing? Just questioning it, just saying, is there a better way?
Hmm.
Helps me be successful. So in that situation, I would handle that situation with the older lady now differently than when I was like 23 years old. But I have to ask myself, how do I need to respond to this?
Right.
Right? You're dealing with, because the context is, here's someone who's living their life, who's at the end of their life, right? Who is trying to think about how to deal. I'm not there. I'm not 90 years old looking back on all the mistakes I've made, right? I can't assume I know where this person has been or where they're going. So I have
Right.
to think about that. And the same thing when you come to Japan, these people aren't, even if they are chauvinistic towards you, they're not evil. They're coming from somewhere. Again, my host father,
Right.
he was coming from somewhere. And now I look back before we had that conversation, there were things he said that were kind of weird, right? Not maybe reflecting his racism, but kind of weird. Like he was trying to sort of see what kind of person I was. He was asking questions that someone who was unaware of my journey would ask, right?
Right.
About like, why is this white and this black, for instance? Things
Right.
like that, right? Which I could get angry, like, yo, dude, look at but they're they never question themselves. People don't do that. They question others.
Right.
But in my mind, I have to say, wait a second. what do I not question because I'm Black, right? And there's a lot of things I don't question. So I have to question, just like I ask these other people to question.
Right.
And it's again, it's so many lessons I've learned, and I apply to work. You know, you don't ask your team to do something you cannot do
Right. And
because they'll
ultimately
sense
it
it.
becomes that questioning becomes a benefit for yourself as well. Because
Yes,
that whatever that situation is, it could have went left or right. And
yeah,
one way could have been a way that was not beneficial, and the other way, depending on how you respond and whatnot. So yeah, I know that, and that was kind of what I was going at as far as leaving that baggage, because we would respond a certain way uh,
yes,
back in the States, but because we all understand the context, right?
yeah,
If that was
yeah.
an old white woman that was 90 years old, her context that we understand might be very different.
Well, old Japanese woman. I wouldn't say white.
No, I'm saying if it was back in the States and it was that
Oh, it
same
would be. Look,
situation.
look, look. I mean, here's another
Yeah,
context. Here's a context to America, right?
right,
Context is if a white woman would have touched my hair and say, "Oh, you're so handsome," she could go back and say, "This has happened historically. That man approached me. That man assaulted me."
right,
Or her boyfriend gets jealous, says, "Well, he forced me, and you could get killed."
right,
That's not happening in Japan. She's not
right,
going to go back to her husband and they're going to get a lynch mob out for you. It's a different context.
right,
So there's not a it's just different. And I'm just saying it's better or worse. I think it's better. Um Quantitatively it's better, but it's still something that to handle it in the correct way, you need to understand the proper context so that you don't come in with because the burden you're feeling, not saying it's wrong, but
right,
that burden you're feeling can sabotage. And in my book, I give an example where my own my own unconscious fears of that racism and how it manifests itself, it derailed me and derailed my marriage. It did. And so I'm speaking experience, I'm speaking from failure, but I just want to use that really difficult example for the people who would listen to this. So if they question something that you've never questioned, because you're asking people to do it. Like if you're, I mean, think about it. 40 years ago when I was a kid, the LGBTQ issue, that not issue, but the topic. I mean, there are people who, because their bubble, have never questioned this
right,
because they didn't have to.
right,
People don't change because they want to; they change because they have to. So you're
right,
dealing
right,
with people who, so you need to understand that context, and then you bring it to Japan. It's different.
right,
It's still challenging, but it's different, and you need to it'd probably be best if you can surround yourself with people that can nurture, because it's hard to think differently when you feel unsafe. You want
right,
to be in a safe environment to
right,
do that. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, I don't want to imply that you can just do it. No, you need to be in a safe space to allow you to question yourself. You can't question yourself when you're under pressure. It doesn't.
right.
It doesn't. It's not. It's not. It'd be unfair to ask that of anyone.
So both the books are on Amazon right now.
Yes. The older one, written in 2000, wow, time flies, is only digital.
Okay.
You can get the ebook on Amazon, the Kindle version, and then for the new book, you can get just a hard, soft. It's a hard copy, but it's a soft cover. Is
Hmm.
available on Amazon.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time and sharing the stories, talking about your experiences and your journey. Uh, I find it very interesting. I'm pretty sure everyone else will as well. So again, uh, thank you for taking time. Is there business
Yeah.
or links or anything that you want to put out there where people can either, I don't know, services, consult with, whatever you do, something like that?
Yeah, well, you can find me my first last name on LinkedIn professionally. I mean, that's what I respond to if you have questions regarding business. And I have
Professionally.
yeah, professionally.
Yeah.
And then I have a website called Sales Improvement Services. And I say improvement because I mentioned before how many times we're trying to improve. It sort of implies I'm trying to improve you, but really I'm just applying what I apply to myself to help other people. Salesimprovement services.com. This is my name, salesimprovement services.com. Is my uh, showcases me and some of the books I've written, my blog, some of the coaching and advising services I do for others, and I can also do for you. Um, those are the two places you can find me. And, I try to respond as quickly as I can. But because I'm only one person, that's why the book exists. You really want to get to know who I am. You read that book, you'll know me, and then you'll get an understanding whether or not you want my advice.
All right. Again, appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jake. Take care.